Welcome back, my friend, to my Sleeping with Scripture series, where we don't just read the Word, we pause and reflect on how it speaks into our lives today. Genesis 38 interrupts Joseph's story with a messy, raw account about Judah and Tamar. At first glance, it feels like drama that doesn't fit, but when we pause, we'll see how God brings redemption out of the most broken places, and how this story ties directly into the lineage of Jesus Christ.
Ooh, that's a good way of putting it, Vicky. Now let's get started. Genesis chapter 38. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers, and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her.
Judah drifts from his family and marries outside God's covenant line. Sometimes walking away from accountability leads to poor choices. You may have seen how one choice can ripple through a family, or you felt the pull of walking away when life gets heavy. This is a warning. Isolation makes us vulnerable.
So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Kezib when she bore him. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him.
Judah arranges Tamar's marriage to his son, but is so wicked that God cuts him off. Our lesson? Sin destroys potential. For us today, it's a reminder that character matters more than opportunity. You may have seen careers and families collapse from moral failure. This is why building strong character now matters for the future.
And Judah said to Onan, Go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother.
Onan uses Tamar but refuses responsibility. This is selfishness at its core, taking without giving. Maybe you've experienced the damage of people not owning their responsibilities. Our culture promotes self-gratification without commitment. But this verse reminds us selfishness robs future generations.
And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown, for he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house.
Judah promises Tamar his younger son, but has no intentions of keeping that promise. Broken promises cut deep, especially from people we trust. Maybe you carry pain from parents, spouses, or teachers who failed you. Or maybe you're still healing from betrayal. But notice, God doesn't forget Tamar. Even when people break promises, God remains faithful.
Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted, and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face.
Out of desperation, Tamar disguises herself and tricks Judah. On the surface, this looks like a scandal, but underneath, it's a story about what happens when women are neglected and left unprotected. You may have seen how family neglect can create generational pain. Others know desperation leads to compromise when no one steps up. But even here, God is still working.
Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" And he said, "I will send a young goat from the flock." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" Then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and cord, and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her, and went in to her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away, and laid aside her veil, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside?" And they said, "There was no harlot in this place." So he returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also the men of the place said there was no harlot in this place. Then Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed, for I sent this young goat and you have not found her." And it came to pass, about 3 months after, that Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry." So Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff." So Judah acknowledged them and said, "She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah my son."
When Tamar is exposed, Judah is ready to condemn her until the truth reveals his own guilt. How often do we judge others harshly while hiding our own sins? This is God's reminder. Check your own heart before pointing fingers. Judah finally admits she is more righteous than I. Repentance starts with owning the truth.
And he never knew her again. Now it came to pass, at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was, when she was giving birth, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah.
Tamar gives birth to twins, Perez and Zerah. And here's the stunning twist. Perez becomes the ancestor of King David, and ultimately of Jesus Christ. Out of brokenness, God brings redemption. Our lesson? No matter how messy your past, God can rewrite your family line for His glory. Genesis 38 is messy, raw, and painful, but it's also beautiful. It shows us that even in family dysfunction, sin, and broken promises, God is still weaving redemption. Perez, born from this story, leads to David, and then to Jesus, our Redeemer. The question for us is this: do you believe God can bring beauty even from your family's mess?
Of course he can. God can do anything.
You're right, Artie. And now I believe it's time for Genesis 39, which is a story about integrity, temptation, and God's favor, even when life seems unfair. Okay, Artie, take it away.
Thanks, Vicky. Genesis chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand.
Even in slavery, Joseph thrived because the Lord was with him. Maybe you've been working faithfully for years, even when unnoticed. Or maybe you feel stuck in a job that doesn't match your dreams. Here's the truth. God's presence, not your position, brings true prosperity.
So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was, from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me."
Joseph has favor, but with favor comes temptation. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. Maybe you face temptations at work, shortcuts, compromises, or emotional entanglements. In a culture that says, do whatever feels good, Joseph's stand is radical. Favor attracts test, but integrity is what carries you forward.
But he refused, and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?"
Joseph says no, not just to Potiphar's wife, but to sin itself. Notice his reason. It's not fear of Potiphar, but loyalty to God. For us, integrity means doing the right thing even when nobody's watching. That means holding on to character even under pressure. It also means resisting compromise when the world says, no one will know.
I've actually had friends to fall into this trap. Now let's continue with verse 10. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her, to lie with her or to be with her. But it happened about this time, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and fled and ran outside.
Joseph literally runs. Sometimes the best way to win is to run. You know, some fights aren't worth staying in, and sometimes the strongest move isn't saying no. It's getting out of the room. Don't flirt with temptation. Flee from it.
And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought in to us the Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside." So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside."
Joseph is falsely accused, framed by the very cloak he left behind. Sometimes doing right still costs you. Maybe you've been blamed unfairly at work, or maybe you've been gossiped about or misrepresented. Our lesson? Integrity doesn't always protect your reputation, but it always protects your destiny.
So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, "Your servant did to me after this manner," that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison.
Joseph loses position again, but not God's presence. Even in prison, God's favor shows up. For us, your environment doesn't define your destiny. When careers stall or collapse, God is still with you. When you feel stuck in life's waiting room, remember, God's presence is your greatest asset.
And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper.
Once again, Joseph rises. From Potiphar's house to prison, the common thread is this: the Lord was with him. Your circumstances may change, but God's favor never does. That's what sustains you. Genesis 39 reminds us that integrity may cost you, but it also positions you for God's favor. Potiphar's wife tried to trap Joseph. False accusations tried to ruin him, but God was still with him. The question is, will you hold on to integrity even when the world punishes you for it? Genesis 40 is a chapter that reminds us what it feels like to be faithful, overlooked, and waiting. Joseph interprets dreams in prison, but the people he helps forgets him. Maybe you have felt the same, doing right but being ignored. Let's see how God works in the waiting.
Genesis chapter 40. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined.
Hold on, Artie, for just a second. So, two important men are thrown into prison with Joseph. Wow. So even in low places, God sends divine connections. Sometimes setbacks put you near the very people who is tied to your future breakthrough. Don't despise small circles, y'all. The people you meet in tough seasons may open doors later.
And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning, and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please."
Even in his own suffering, Joseph notices others' pain. Leadership means caring about people even under stress. Don't get so consumed with your own struggles that you miss opportunities to serve. Sometimes your compassion is the key to your calling.
Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, "Behold, in my dream, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon."
Joseph brings good news to the butler. Restoration is coming. Sometimes God gives us hope through others in our waiting seasons. Our lesson? God can turn things around suddenly, but it's in His time, not ours.
When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there were 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. So Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you.
Whoa, that's some hard truth. Sometimes faithfulness means speaking the truth, though, not just comfort. You know, hard conversations are part of leadership. And honesty feels uncomfortable sometimes, but it does bring clarity. Love doesn't lie. Artie, I bet that Baker was not expecting that one.
I think you're right, Vicky. I think you're right. Now it came to pass, on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him.
Joseph is forgotten. The man he helped doesn't keep his word. Maybe you've been overlooked after years of loyalty, or maybe you've been ghosted or unappreciated. But here's the hope. People may forget, but God never does. Delay is not denial. Now Genesis 40 shows us that waiting seasons trust our faith, but they also refine our gifts. Joseph was faithful in prison even when forgotten. The truth is, God's timing is perfect, and the right doors will open when it's time. The question is, will you keep giving and using your gift even in the waiting?
You know, Vicky, I'm sure God has tested a lot of people with making them wait. But you know what my grandma always said? Good things come to those who wait. Chapter 41. Then it came to pass, at the end of 2 full years, that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. Suddenly there came up out of the river 7 cows, fine-looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and gaunt, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 fine-looking and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time. And suddenly 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 thin heads, blighted by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the 7 thin heads devoured the 7 plump and full heads. So Pharaoh awoke, and indeed it was a dream. Now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my faults this day, when Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. Both me and the chief baker, we each had a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now there was a young Hebrew man with us there, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it." So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Behold, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river. Suddenly 7 cows came up out of the river, fine-looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the gaunt and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. When they had eaten them up, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were just as ugly as at the beginning. So I awoke. Also I saw in my dream, and suddenly 7 heads came up on one stalk, full and good. Then behold, 7 heads, withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the thin heads devoured the 7 good heads. So I told this to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me." Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams are one. And the 7 thin and ugly cows, which came up after them, are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads, blighted by the east wind, are 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them 7 years of famine will arise, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe." And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine." So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand, and put it on Joseph's hand. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the 2nd chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paaneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Now in the 7 plentiful years the ground brought forth abundantly. So he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Then the 7 years of plenty which were in the land of Egypt ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. The famine was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Then Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, do." The famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. And the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. So all countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all lands.
That was Genesis chapters 38 through 41, and I pray it spoke to your heart today. Remember, these stories aren't just history, they're a mirror for our own lives. God still calls us back, still redeems our mistakes, and still turns pain into purpose. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His word light your path and dreams.
Good night.